So we're actually going to start counting down now. Like, this is kind of exciting. I mean, we've been talking about this for weeks. Welcome to Do You Approve This Groove, a project where two old friends dive headfirst into the 500 greatest albums of all time and beyond. We're going to relive them like we're trading the ultimate mixtape, one legendary record at a time. Each episode, we take a deep dive into iconic albums, rediscover their magic, and see if they hold up after all of these years. We'll rank each album and open up our hot takes for discussion. So whether you're hearing it for the first time or for the 100th, whether you agree or disagree, we're turning the volume up and bringing you along for the ride. A lot of thoughts. I mean, I wouldn't say deep thoughts have gone into this, but there's been a lot of thoughts. So our first album to chat about is number 500. You got to start somewhere, and that is Arcade Fire's album Funeral, which was released in 2004. This is on the label Merge, which I'd never heard about, but seeing that this was kind of their first. This was their debut album, so to have one of your debut albums like jump on in the top 500 is something. It was self-produced out of Canada. I didn't know that they were from Montreal, actually. Yeah. Oh, it's Funeral from Arcade Fire. What did you think about it?
I I was it was fun to start the list off with this album because
Agreed.
I was just mixed. I was just like I'm glad it wasn't like, start us off with something phenomenal or start us off with something that I really didn't like. I was really kind of straight down the middle with this. I thought that there was a whole lot of songwriting talent there. I thought that there's a lot of interesting chord progressions, but there was also really interesting melodies, both vocal melodies and music melodies.
As, when we were talking about this, I mean, one of the first things I said to you was, "There's so many instruments."
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Like and that's what.
And that could be a good thing. It could be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, like I thought it was satisfying to listen. I think satisfying is the best word that I could use for the experience of listening to that album. It was satisfying to listen
Yeah.
to, especially on headphones. The production was really good, and the instrumentation was really good.
So I came into this album, whatever. We're gonna tell the truth. I came into this album being like, I hate this band. It just seemed like they came up at it all seemed presumptuous to me, almost precocious. Like they came up at this time where like I was like dead set in my indie emo alternative stuff, and it felt like they were like adjacent to that almost in the indie realm, right? But they rang more to me like a Modest Mouse, like that, in that vein,
Yeah.
like that, you know what I mean? Not like that subgenre.
Hmm.
So when I heard it, I just remember thinking and seeing them play like on the Grammys and being like, just because you can play all the instruments doesn't mean you need to, right? Like, I mean, why do we have a mandolin and there's one person with a triangle, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, what are we like, what is this actually bringing to the table?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And to some extent I still kind of feel that way, but but like you said, like I can appreciate it. One of there was a couple songs that stood out to me, but I mean, the one that I think most people would be familiar with is it's track 7 from where my thought was like, oh yeah, this was in Where the Wild Things Are, right?
Hmm.
Like that was in the promotional stuff, it was in the soundtrack, it was
Yeah.
like that was my anchor for this album. I was like, oh yeah, I've heard this album before. There's a couple others that I thought were kind of interesting at the end. um I think Haiti is the one that kind of got
Hmm.
me, and then the song Rebellion, track 9, and a few others sounded to me like Jack Antonoff produced Steel Train stuff. And if do you know who Jack Antonoff is?
I know who he is as a producer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So he was Drive Through Records, Steel
Hmm.
Train. Like, I mean, he had this band that honestly isn't a lot unlike Arcade Fire, I guess, in instrumentation, less instruments. But like there was some of that I heard, and I was just like, this sounds like a Jack Antonoff song to me. And that's like, I don't mean that as a dig or like
Hmm.
that was before Jack Antonoff was writing songs like that.
Hmm.
So I kind of I enjoyed the back half of this album more than the first half, but yeah, it was
It,
sure. What did you
it
score
was,
it?
well, not as highly as I made it sound when I first started talking about it. So when you said that, that song was from, Where the Wild Things Are, promotional material, like the sense that I got listening to this album was like, oh yeah, this song could be the music in a car commercial. Or like this song could be the
Sure.
music in like a pharmaceutical ad or something like that. It was, I I felt like I could hear the skill, the songwriting and the arrangement skill there, but it never crossed the line over into interesting for me. Like it just kept the same. It was very repetitive and predictable
Mm.
as it went through.
Hmm.
The songs were on the verge of becoming interesting, but never quite got there for me. And I
Sure.
think I think for me a lot of that came down to the drums, because as much as there was interesting stuff going on in the instrumentation all around, every single song felt like it was just this halftime snare kick hi-hat twos and fours straight through that took what could have
Right.
been interesting and just brought it back into this easily packaged boring stuff. So I ended up going with
Which is with
uh,
it. Go ahead.
I ended up going with a 2 out of 5 after all of
Yeah, I
that.
saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made me laugh. Yeah, I honestly like this one surprised me in that I gave it a 3.5. I think that the song "Wake Up" from I mean, it is a commercial song at this point.
Hmm.
I thought that that is one that if I'm in the right mood, I would put that on.
Hmm.
Right, I would play that for my kids, like just be like, hey, check this out. You know what I mean? That to me, that song did have such like a swelling with the O's in the part, right? That and the orchestration, all that. That did get me. Like you said, the rest of it, yeah, I was just again, it was okay, not
Hmm.
offensive. If I lay it against my scale, right? It was
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Sure, I get it. And I don't think that like I don't think that the fact that it was just like, yeah, the music was fine. It was well done, but it wasn't interesting. Like it wasn't interesting to, like we've talked before. It wasn't interesting to me. I didn't get into the lyrics a lot.
Hmm.
I couldn't resonate with it a lot. But again, they played the notes.
Yeah. They did.
They played the
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people really liked it.
Hmm. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, looking at the
It
awards
was
that it
okay.
won, like, yeah. Yeah.
I think it should be a 3 just for that guitar and Wake Up.
Yeah.
That guitar sound and the build in that song enough. Like if they didn't do if the other what there's 10 songs on this album,
Hmm.
yeah, if the other 9 songs on this album were just kind of like yeah, like maybe even just singer songwriter ish,
Hmm.
right? I'd be like, okay, but that song is a winner,
Yeah.
which is something I found out on a lot of these other albums too. I was like, yeah, these songs like whatever, but that song,
That's,
that's a good one.
yeah.
And I wonder sometimes about how much like singular songs carry. I don't think this is one. I think people like the people that voted on these appreciate this album for its musicianship
Hmm.
or for at a time where like I mean I make fun of it, but right for at a time when bands weren't like going nuts with instrumentation, somewhere, but
Yeah.
like to get in to break through into the more popular music, critically acclaimed music that again is being commercialized even.
Hmm.
You can take that for what it's worth, for better or worse, but like that was different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that. I mean, that was definitely. 2004 is coming off of like TRL. You know what I mean? It's coming
Yeah.
off
That's
of
true.
boy bands
Yeah.
and Christina Aguilera and like all that stuff. I mean, it's also coming off of the '90s indie music, but still, like, yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know. I still thought was presumptuous and precocious and like overkill. But anyways, that's just me. So, all right. So that was Arcade Fire's album
All
Funeral
right,
at 500.
one
Moving on
down,
to
400, yeah,
499.
499 to go.
One down, 499 to go. So the next one is the album Ask Rufus by Rufus on the
Hmm.
list, but featuring is like an understatement, but um I mean a very featured player, Chaka Khan, which I did not know when I started this album.
No.
Um that one's at number 499. This album came out on my mom's birthday, April 12th, in 1977. Shout
Hmm.
out, Mom. On ABC Records. It says that it was self-produced because I think Rufus Wainwright and his band like basically took care of themselves. This was the collective's fifth album, which I thought was interesting. This was their fifth album.
Hmm.
What did you think about Ask Rufus?
I was the same. I featuring Shaka Khan. She's the singer.
Right,
What do you mean
right.
featuring? Like she's the singer. But I've been kind of bitten by a bit of a funk bug in the last year or two. So I was really looking forward to listening to this just after, just a quick
Sure.
look at what it was and what to expect from it. I was like, oh, this sounds like something that could potentially be up my alley. For me, this kicked off high. Like that first song at
Yes.
midnight, I was in my car driving and like just grooving with that song.
Yes. My first note is track one, absolute banger.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
that was my first thought too. Yeah,
Yep.
that's funny.
Yep. And it really hit me hard and quick, and I really enjoyed it. It kind of after that it just leveled out for me. I found myself tapping my foot a lot to the bass. I loved the rhythm section throughout this entire album, which is, that's the funk thing. Like the bass and the drums on this are were a good juxtaposition to the drums on the Arcade Fire album, because the drummer for Rufus was just, he was in the pocket and he had feel, and you could feel his feel for the music, and it was just enjoyable to listen to. I really liked it. I The thing that took away from it a little bit for me was there was a lot of like orchestration to it. Like there was a lot of, orchestral arrangements as a part of it, and it kind of veered a little bit from funk into more disco-y feel at times, which is, it's the 70s. That makes a whole lot of sense. That kind of drew me out of it a little bit. And lyrically, there wasn't much for me, but, again, I'm not anymore much of a lyric
It's
person.
yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that because, we talk about context, right? This is the I mean, I've heard Shaka Khan songs, sure, and
Hmm.
I'm sure I have. I know that I have. I didn't know I had no exposure to this. So to hear you say like that it got out of funk a little bit, right? And
Hmm.
more into the notes on Apple Music say for their fourth album, so that's, with the collaboration, Rufus transformed from party hardy funk rompers to purveyors of smooth, melancholy 70s sounds. String arrangements and dinnertime jazz accent the band's angular bass notes, and the songs unfold at a mid tempo piece that'll soothe as it stirs.
And I think that,
So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that aligns with how the rest of, after that first song is a funk banger. But
Yeah,
but the rest of that album, the rest of the album, like I said, for me, it kind of just leveled out, and that makes
yes.
sense.
I think a good example of that is Hollywood, which I know we talked about. Like, I heard that song, and I don't know if you know the reference or know the sample, but like, I heard this, and it took me. it took me all of the first listen and probably two other songs to be like, where I know this, and I was singing the hook in my mind. I was like, I know this is sampled, and then I was like, oh, it's the J, and I didn't know which one it was, but it was like J Cole used this. I know J Cole used this. So that one, I mean, that's a smooth. Like I'm not a purveyor of funk. I
Hmm.
don't like. Sure, I got it. I could probably pick it out of a lineup, right?
Hmm.
But I was like, this isn't funk. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and that one was cool. The other song that like killed me was the last song, Egyptian song, like which felt wonderfully out of place.
Yeah.
Like I mean, thematically, like everything, like but it also had a little bit of an earworm to it. Where I was listening to it tonight as I was
Hmm.
making dinner, just kind of refreshing. I was like, oh yeah, I remember this one. That one was kind of interesting to me. Yeah, I loved at midnight. I thought that one was amazing. So for me to pick out at midnight the first track and then Hollywood because it was sampled, like it's like okay, that's kind of interesting. But I enjoyed it. Like I mean, I gave it a two in that like I don't think I need to come back to it.
Hmm.
Maybe other than at midnight if for some reason I really want to stir it up. But like I appreciated it.
Yeah.
Like sure for what it was. Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah.
But I don't. I feel like I got it.
You got it, and that's all you need.
Yeah,
Yeah. I and
I'm moving on.
I gave it a three because I did. I think I wanted to like it more than I ended up liking it, but
I think that's fair.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, it's I enjoyed it for what it was, and for me it was fine. When I come back to like when I simplify my ratings down a little bit, that's what a three is for me. It was fine.
All right.
Oh, I can't wait for this
So
next one.
that. Oh my God. Yeah. I have thoughts. Oh, I have hot takes. Yeah. All right. So coming in at 498, according to Rolling Stone's rating, is the album "Suicide" by the band Suicide. All right. It was released just after Christmas. How wonderfully poetic. In 1977 on Red Star Records. It was produced by, I'm pretty sure this was the band, Craig Leone and Marty Thau. Um, they're some New York folks. This was their debut album. Um, we have thoughts. If you have never heard this album, find it wherever you listen to it and just put it on, like, and go on this ride with us because this was different. Okay,
This
what are your thoughts?
I so I enjoyed the first couple of songs. I was okay with, and I think okay with is as strong as I could put it. It was droning and just kind of went on and on. It felt to me like the music was the soundscape for the lyrics. The music was just creating an atmosphere for the lyrics, and it was interesting in that sense. The lyrics themselves I didn't have much for, and it was just
So one of the
okay.
things, yeah, I so one of the wait, you thought the album was just okay, or the lyrics were just okay?
The first few songs were just okay.
First few songs, okay, and I think that speaks to the music because this album is 32 minutes long, which
Hmm.
thank you. Um, I feel like within the first 5 or 6 minutes, you get it
Yeah,
right. And
that's yeah.
so if you don't feel like listening to this, um, this is one of like the first sort of synth led electronic music, like but not like EDM house bangers. Like this was like a gritty. I mean, I say it was this to me. This is like a gritty, um, almost lo-fi like snapshot. And I read this too, but snapshot of like life in New York City
Yeah,
in the 70s.
yeah.
I mean, some of the lyrics refer to this. Here are my notes. All right, I said it feels like I'm stuck in a synth loop. Like it was just like the same almost. Here's okay. Here's another thing. I said sometimes this is one bar of a Doors song played for 3 minutes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because there's like some of the electric organ, but it's only like a 4 note riff, like over
Oh.
and over and over and over again. He almost had like a Lou Reed kind of spoken
Yep.
crooner kind of lyrics to it, which I was thankful that I had the palette to kind of recognize that
Hmm.
because it helped me place it. I don't think he's not trying to be Velvet Underground from what I can tell, but like at least I was like, okay. Um, the other note that I had is this no doubt gets played at indie record stores.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? When you walk in, you're like, what
What
the
the hell
heck
is?
is
Yeah.
going on here? Like, the guy that picked this is cooler than I am. Okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
And this is one of those albums that I I listened to this. What was so it's the middle of January now. I listened to this album in October, in the middle of October,
oh wow,
and this was one that I did not go back and re-listen to in preparation for today because I didn't need to, and I didn't
right?
want to. It went okay for the first couple for the first couple of songs, and then it got to Frankie Teardrop.
Yep.
And Frankie
10
Teardrop
coming in at 10 minutes and 26 seconds.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep. And Frankie Teardrop is it's a panic attack in a song. Like there is and I ended up I came across it just looking into the album after listening to it, like what the hell is this or what was this supposed to be? There is even a Frankie Teardrop challenge where you're supposed to
tell me about this.
Yeah, you're supposed to put on headphones and put on Frankie Teardrop at night alone and go walk through, the woods or a cemetery or something like that and see if you can get through the entire 10-minute song without pulling the headphones out and running home. Like, I don't think I could. The subject matter of that song is like, it's disturbing. It's just a disturbing song. And just the howls and screeches and screams, just throughout that entire song, that took the album from like, this is okay, to like, what the hell did I just listen to?
In listening to it, this is like the third album on the list, but this was one where I was like, this is not one of the 500 best albums. It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that with a full chest, right? It's not. But then, so that got me thinking, right? And I was like, but obviously, there's got to be something to it for a lot of people, or for a small, important or influential group of people. And I'm reading about it, and they say that granted that the monotony is intentional, much of the cut is chilling the screams and drift of the instrument into landscapes of blankness and reaches the sought level of terror. Yeah. And then the mood is broken by dumb lyrics, which I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like the music is creepy. It puts you in this weird headspace. He's waxing about living in the city. I mean, like you said, Frankie Teardrop is ridiculous. It was definitely like, this is not one that I would like. This is not a mood listen to me. Like,
No.
maybe as a Halloween mixtape, sure.
Yeah.
But it's not like I can't imagine anyone picking this vinyl off the shelf. I mean, like, yeah, I'm gonna vibe with this for a little bit today.
Yeah.
Like,
This is, yeah.
No, that's not what this is for.
No, this
This
was
is not what this album is for.
this was a weird art house movie as an album.
Absolutely, and there's something to be said for that, I guess. So,
Yeah. And this is one, like I said, when I was originally listening through these and posting like little quick reviews on Instagram and TikTok and stuff, I had people come at me for saying I gave this a 2 out of 5, and I feel like that's maybe even generous. Which is another thing that I was thinking about comparing. Like, I gave this a 2 out of 5 and Arcade Fire. But when I think about the two of them, I would 100% rather listen to Arcade Fire but I gave him the same score. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I had people come at me for giving this a 2 out of 5 because to them it is a seminal album in whatever genre it is that they associate it with. So what did you give
That's
it?
funny. Oh, what did I mean, I didn't give it much, that's for sure. I gave it a 1. That's for, and my scoring, that is a no thanks, definitely skip. But having talked about it, it's one of the weird things with music, right? As there's that meme, I think, where or the joke about like how you can't help sometimes go, "Oh my god, that smells awful, smell it."
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah,
to
yeah.
me, this is like one of those albums. It's like, "Oh, you've never heard,
Listen
listen
to
to
it. Yeah,
this."
yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So ironically, this might be one that sticks with me most. You know what I mean? Like,
I will
which
never
I guess.
forget this album.
Okay, so now having said that, if we reframe this, right, and don't
Hmm.
get all big headed art on me, but like as a piece of art, I don't know what it means, but it was
It
provocative.
was yeah. And from what it
It
sounds
gets
like,
the people going.
yeah, and from what it sounds like, it did what it set out to do.
Successful art.
Yeah,
Well done, Suicide.
yeah.
Well done.
Just
That's a
not
nice job, guys.
just not for us.
All right. So that takes us to the 497th best album of all time, which is, I mean, this by various artists, but the album's title is "The Indestructible Beat of Soweto." It was released as a compilation in 1985 by Earthworks Records, out of South Africa. Um, I mean, the other notes on this one, I mean, it's a debut, but again, this was the one of the first of its kind. Obviously, the music is not new. This was not the first recording or release of this music, but to bring it to a Western audience, from what I gather, this was the first time that it kind of crossed over into some mainstream. Again, I think the timeline here is interesting. I talk about that in some notes coming up. But 1985 is a big year for this kind of stuff. What were your thoughts on the indestructible beat of Soweto?
Off the bat, this is the kind of album that I wanted to do this listening project for, right? Like I had never heard of this before. This wasn't something that like I knew of, but just never got around to. I never heard of this album before, and probably would never have heard of it if not for listening through this list. So I was really eager to listen to it as something just entirely different from anything else that I ever would have listened to otherwise. And I ended up liking it. There was a part of it that, and I keep comparing the things that I listened to the things that I've listened to recently as well. And there was a piece of this that kind of reminded me in a really weird way of that Suicide album, where
Mm,
there would be in these songs there would be some sort of melody that would repeat throughout the whole song. And usually it was like
mhm.
it was a bass melody or just a low guitar melody that would repeat throughout the entire song. Whereas in the Suicide album, like it was just that, and it was droning and repetitive and awful. With this, it was what they built. Oh, my dog is coming in here. It like they built a song around those repeating melodies and made it interesting and fun to listen to.
Yeah,
So yeah,
which I think is just it's a characteristic of that genre. I mean, the style of music, right?
mm-hmm,
Like, yeah, I sometimes I have a problem with music like this and like reggae, in that, like you said, it is repetitive, or I don't know, some other like reggaeton stuff
mm-hmm,
like that. It's like this is the same drum beat, like,
mm-hmm,
and yep, there's the keyboards again, and yeah, okay. Um, but this had just enough to kind of keep my interest. You
mm-hmm.
know what I mean? I was interested in it. I know. One of my first thoughts, and again, this is my lack of exposure to it. Um, was I my first thought was, did this come out before or after Paul Simon's Graceland? Right, like where was this on the timeline? And
Mm-hmm.
and it came out before,
Mm-hmm.
right? It came out before that album. So to me, right, there's no way that Paul Simon either didn't know or hadn't heard this stuff and was like, I want to work with
I
those
like that.
guys.
Yeah.
Like this is different. This is
Yeah.
cool. Like um so so with that in mind, like I was that it almost like gave me more context for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um in that I was like I could place it almost, you know, like I have some knowledge of this sort of thing, even if it is only, you know, Ladysmith, Black Mambazo working with Paul Simon, you
Right.
know, or like, okay, I got it. Um, some of the songs that stuck out to me in this one um, was I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but the fourth track, like my notes that like it just has this weird reverb to it, like the vocals were different in that
Yeah.
one, like they were playing through an effects pedal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what a lot of I think producers and you know you find a sound and you're playing with stuff and you find a sound like oh this is interesting and then like you use that you know what I mean like that sound came through um, and stuck out to me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah,
I
but I
liked.
I mean what did you score this one?
I gave it a 3 again, 3 out of 5. I liked how, to me, cohesiveness was actually a big factor for me in this album, the way it flowed from one song to another, because being various artists, like a compilation like this, it's got to be hard to put something together that flows in in a way that makes sense. But I feel like it did that while also providing some variety to the songs. Like, one song to the next didn't feel like it was the same song over and over again, but it also
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like massively different each time. And going back and looking and seeing, the different artists that they pulled together to do this album, I mean, it was a mix of artists that were more focused on the more traditional aspects of South African music, combined with artists who were more modern in their playing and their writing styles. There was a mix of, more urban artists and more rural artists, and the way that they were able to pull all of that together and make a cohesive and interesting to listen to album. I gave it a 3. It's not something that I would actively seek out again to listen to
Mm-hmm.
if it came on. If it was one of those that like I didn't know what to listen to and I opened my music app and that was like,
You wouldn't hate skip it.
yeah, like you haven't listened to this in
Yeah,
a long time, like I could put that back on again.
sure. Yeah, I scored it a 2. It's again just on my scale just because I was like okay I hear it. This was one of those where like again even as a lyrics last kind of person, not having any lyrics to kind of like gravitate to really made it hard to I and it's funny thinking about this. It made it hard for me to recognize like a clear song structure and follow it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of like it's almost like it was more abstract, kind of like just floating around. You
Yeah.
know, like this is just a soundscape. It was like a soundscape to me,
Mm-hmm.
which was enjoyable. But I like, I got it. Cool.
Yeah.
It was good.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, one of the things that we haven't talked about is the idea that you know these rankings. This is like basically the third iteration of the Rolling Stone rankings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first set of them came under fire almost immediately after they were published for its lack of diversity and whitewashing music in general, and especially male fronted music or male produced music, male written music, that sort of thing. Um, so you know with that in mind I'm listening to this and kind of going like yeah this is like different. I mean for what it is, like again I don't have a context for it. I did not grow up as this with my culture. I you know but
Mm-hmm.
like I can appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's so different to me. It was so different. It's like yeah put it on the list. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, and like I said at the beginning of this one, this is the sort of album that I was excited to have to listen to or to be exposed to, because it's not something that I would have been exposed to otherwise. And by the time I got through it, I was happy to have listened to it.
Cool. All right. 496 is Donde están los ladrones? Right, sure. Yeah, great. Got it. Sorry. I took French in high school.
Gotta
By
roll that R.
Shakira. Yeah, ladrones. There we go. By Shakira. This one, it was interesting for me to see, was released in 1998 on Sony Music Columbia. It was produced in part, but most notably by Emilio Estefan, right? I don't know if
Hmm.
you saw this in the
I
notes.
didn't
So
know.
this was Emilio Estefan and Gloria's husband and
Hmm.
Miami Sound Machine, um, cultivating some artists. Shakira's obviously from Colombia. I mean, I think we all know that.
Hmm.
Thanks, Wyclef. But cultivating, kind of that artist and bringing them along. At least, from my perspective, I don't know the history of this artist, but from my perspective, like bringing them to a wider audience, producing them. Yeah. So this was interesting to me. This is Shakira's fourth album.
Hmm.
So she'd been doing it for a while by the time we heard Hips Don't Lie and all that stuff, you know what I mean? Um, and man, this one was not Hips Don't Lie.
No.
Um, right. The first thing is it's a Spanish album.
Hmm.
Um,
Pre crossover into the American audience.
yeah. Yeah. And yeah, what were your thoughts with Shakira here?
So I the first thing I thought after listening to, I got through like maybe two or three songs, and I thought to myself, this is the so this was 1998, right? It was still in the 90s. This, to me, after the first few songs, I thought this is the Hispanic Alanis Morissette. Like,
Really?
yeah, yeah. Which was interesting because then when I went and looked more into it, like that was a relatively common comparison for her for this album.
Uh-huh.
There was a little bit more rock to it. There was a little bit more of an edge to it. Not being fluent in Spanish lyrically, I don't know exactly what all of the songs were about, but it just had that feel of Jagged Little Pill. Not quite that edge, but approaching that.
Hmm.
I was taken by surprise by this album.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I thought that a lot of this sounded like 90s country music.
Okay.
Like with the instrumentation and just kind of the vibe of it. Like I don't even have like my palette of country music isn't enough to name drop, but like it reminded me of that kind of vibe in that time.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, even while we were kind of just like, yeah, it was all right, like cool, I get it, this was cool, this is different. I mean, a lot of people loved it.
I
I mean, a lot of people love this
Mhm.
album.
This is honestly the first album on the list that I have since gone back and re-listened to, like
Really.
because I chose to. Yeah. Um, my daughter now asks for this album to put it on.
That's awesome.
She loves listening to it. I There was, having never heard this album before, there was still just in the music and in the production of it, there was a nostalgia to it for me. I
Hmm.
it I felt like a 90s kid listening to this album. And
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I enjoy, I mean, I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. So
Wow,
stepping up.
nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I give this one a two. Again, on my scale, that's like a yeah. I don't need to hear it again. Like, cool, I got it. Um, this album went platinum in a lot of countries. One thing I found interesting when researching this sort of thing is that the platinum plateau, right, for the U.S. is a million units sold,
Hmm.
or what however they measure it, whatever, a million units sold. It is not a million units sold in every country. And I
Oh,
think it's understandable based on populations and
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so like this album is certified four times platinum in Argentina, four times in Chile, three times in Colombia, twice platinum in Mexico, gold in Peru, platinum in Spain, three times platinum in Turkey.
Hmm.
It did go platinum in the U.S. And then it's platinum in Uruguay and Venezuela as well,
I
with 4 million units worldwide sold. For again, to me, an album that I did not know existed
Yeah. I that
from an artist that like we are familiar with, right? And is
mhm,
still going and
right.
like arguably making music that is still relevant. I was
Mhm.
like, oh, I didn't know that. Which I thought was kind of interesting. It'll be interesting, and I haven't looked ahead in the list to see if other Shakira albums are on here or
Uh,
if this is the one that people are like, no, this is the best one.
hmm.
I don't know.
I haven't. Yeah, I
I'd be a
haven't
little
looked
bit
to see that.
disappointed if this was the best one.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd be disappointed, but
I hearing that it was
um,
that popular in Turkey is interesting. Like I one thing that I
yeah,
had written down in my notes was a little bit of a blend of Latin American and Middle Eastern music. So
sure.
to hear that it was big in a country like Turkey, I guess sort of makes
Well, there you
sense.
go.
Yeah.
You weren't totally off the mark there. Yeah. Um, all right. So that was Shakira. Donde están los ladrones? Cool. At number 496. 495 was probably the one that the first one on the list where I was like, I know this one.
Yep.
I know this one.
Yep.
And that is Boys to Men's album. I don't know how to start two.
Two.
The
Yeah.
Roman numeral two. Released on August 30th, 1994 by Motown Records, produced by a few people, but of note, Babyface, Brian McKnight, and L.A. Reid. Three names that we know. Um, from, you guessed it, Philly,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
USA. This is Boyz II Men's third album, and coincidentally, not the one that I thought it was.
Oh,
I was
really?
almost disappointed when I first heard this one. Yeah. Because when I think of Boyz II Men, I do not think of this album. My first thought is not "I'll Make Love to You" or "On Bended Knee." Those are not my knee-jerk Boyz II Men references. Mine is
Like
Motown
Motown. Yeah.
Philly. That
Yep.
yeah, like that. Oh,
Bebop,
what is it? That
Motown.
New
Yeah.
Jack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
New Jack swing, like that
Yeah.
beat, that drum fill, and all that stuff. That's what I hear. And again, I know of this album from my cousin Aaron's CD. When we were unloading hay wagons, we used to listen to this one a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I like yesterday, sweeping the barn floor, Motown Philly, yeah. like over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started listening to this, I saw this on the list. I was like, yes, sweet, this is gonna be awesome. And then I played it. I was like,
Yeah.
that's not this album.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay. So then I had to go with it different eyes. So what were your thoughts on the Boys to Men album?
I same thing. I had this album when I was a kid. I remember I remember this album. This was the same the same the first one on the list that I went into like, oh, I know this album. Like and now listening to it, I think back and I think, who the hell let a 9-year-old kid have this album? This is like sexy as hell. And I'm glad that we didn't have Google back then, because I'd be, what does "I'll make love to you" mean? Like, like,
It was on pop radio.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
on pop radio.
yeah. I mean, I their voices are phenomenal. Like, I love listening to them.
My God, yeah. I mean,
The acapella songs were great.
yeah.
I enjoyed that. To me, it
The
ended up,
arrangements are crazy.
Mhm.
Like, yeah.
but to me, it ended up kind of being a confusing mix of bangers and duds. And the first song and the last song, the thank you at the beginning was really good, and I always remembered and was excited to listen to again their cover of "Yesterday," the Beatles song at the end of
Huh?
the album. But the only other songs on the album that I actually liked were the singles. "On Bended Knee," "Water Runs Dry," "I'll Make Love to You." Outside of those songs, I was just like, eh.
I don't care. Yeah.
Yeah.
My note says without the two singles and yesterday, this would be a two for me.
Yeah. And it was a two for me.
I would have.
Yeah.
I ranked it a three because, like, okay, like there's a time and a place for those three songs,
Mm-hmm.
right? But other than those, personally, I have no need for it.
Yeah.
Like, whatever. I'm moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, we're in the minority on that take.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this album was the first ever winner of the Grammy for Best R&B Album. Which shout out to the recording for finally figuring it out. But
Hmm.
um, you want to talk about platinum? This album went 12 times platinum in the U.S. 12 times platinum. That was back when people were buying music.
Yeah.
12,000 or yeah, 12,000, 12 million records sold. And some of those were cassettes. That's awesome. Um, it also, unsurprisingly, went platinum in Canada and a couple other places. I mean, this ended the decade, the 90s decade, at number 13 on the US Billboard 200 charts. Like this
Six
album,
years
like
after it came out.
yeah, I mean the however they calculate that. It says the
Oh,
decade
gotcha.
end chart performance for this album was the 13th best selling
Gotcha.
album from 1990 to 99.
Gotcha. Over that
Um
time period.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it got to number one on the Billboard 200 in the U.S. It got to number one on the R&B hip hop albums through Billboard. No, number three in Zimbabwe. That's the highest it charted there. Um, Also number one in France, number one in New Zealand, um, and some single digits in a lot of other places. People love Boyz II Men, man, but yeah, I don't know, like that idea of music as a business, right? So I mean, it's such juxtaposed against like kind of the music that I prefer, where it's like they at this point it's not, it's I wouldn't say that they couldn't miss, but you know what I mean? Like it's like if people are handing you good songs, it almost doesn't matter who's recording them.
Right.
Like I
Yeah.
mean, it does, but like if a band has or if a group has momentum
Hmm.
and they put out this song that has been workshopped and people love and it's well written and I'm not going to take anything away from that. But if they workshop it and they get it out there, like could a lot of could a lot of groups have put this song out? Oh, with the right promotion, I bet they probably could have.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know this, but to wrap this one up, respect to Boyz II Men because I mean it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
This
Oh
was
yeah.
for better or worse, and in a weird way, songs of our childhood. Oh my god, amazing! Um, Awkward middle school dances,
Hmm. Yep.
never gonna feel. I know there is no doubt that we danced at Broadway Middle School's gymnasium to "I'll
I'll
Make
make love.
Love to You"
Yep.
as seventh or eighth
Yep.
graders.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Guaranteed. Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild. What a time to be alive. All right. Thank you, Boys Men, for that one. All right. So 494 is the album presenting the fabulous Ronettes from the Ronettes. This album came out in 1964 on, I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's Phil Spector and his partner's name put together. Phil's Feels label, produced by Phil Spector. I don't, I've never heard of him. Um, nobody knows anything about him. He didn't
No.
go on to do anything of
He's a
note.
he's a nobody.
Yeah, but obviously this came from the U.S. This was their one and only album put like produced as the Ronettes.
Hmm.
Um, Ronnie Spector obviously recorded a lot more stuff and had a long career. So this was their debut and only album. Um, what were your thoughts on this one?
It was okay. The songwriting I liked. The songwriting and arrangements I liked. I I'm sure we'll probably go into Phil Spector a little bit more when we have, there's a whole greatest hits of Phil Spector album coming up in a little while. So I won't say too much about
All
him
right.
here. But it, listening to his production is interesting. And it was
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable to listen to. My main takeaway from this album was that I'm a 39-year-old married guy with two kids in 2025 and not a lovesick 16-year-old in 1964. I
Right.
felt very little with this album.
Interesting.
Really at all. I from an overview, like a high level looking down on it, I can say that I can recognize that the songs are well written and they're very well performed, and I can give it its due for that. But thinking back to
Hmm.
that rubric in terms of my connection to the songs, to the album,
Sure.
or the percent of the songs on the album that I like, there wasn't much. I just it felt it just fell flat for me.
Interesting. So we haven't talked about this yet fully, but like my musical palette includes this stuff in that working with my dad, stuff like that. Like he listened to classic rock radio, the stuff from when he was in high school and
Hmm.
in college years and stuff like that, for the most part. And then every once in a while, it's like, how many times can I hear this Leonard Skinner song? Like, I remember he used to say, like, man, they play this Leonard Skinner song like this time of day, like 5 days a week. You know what I mean? And if you listen to that much radio, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, he would switch it to like the golden oldies, like Motown,
Yep.
that version of radio. So I have a fond memory of at least one summer, headed into seventh grade when we remodeled our house, um, listening to nothing but golden oldies radio the entire summer. And when I say that, like people are like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you listen to an hour a day." No, like we were working all day, and I listened to it from 7 in the morning until like I turned off the light because the radio's always on in my house growing up. The
Yep.
radio was just on,
Yep.
even when we weren't there. So like, I mean, I had my 10,000 hours. Not literally, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like I had it. So when I heard some of these songs, I was like, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah." So I just have a sweet spot for some of this stuff. One of the things that I couldn't help but think was I would love, and I didn't do it, but I would love someone to gather the lyrics and then control F and count the number of times baby
Yeah.
or you or
Yeah.
love
Love. Yeah.
is said in this, because even when you just read through the track listings,
Yeah.
Walking in the Rain, okay, got it. Do I Love You? So Young, different. The best part of Breaking Up, different. I Wonder. What Did I Say is a Ray Charles song. Okay, but
Hmm.
then you get to side two of this record. Be My Baby, You Baby, Baby I Love You, How Does It Feel When I Saw You, and Chapel of Love.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that when you talk about a cohesive piece, it was like this is generally the same song.
Right.
The I mean, now to some extent, so many songs are the same song, right? But like this is literally like packed right together. Like
Hmm.
that three song, Be My Baby, You Baby, Baby I Love You. Those are three back to back
Just
songs.
yeah.
I dug the cover of Ray Charles, What I Say. I thought that was kind of cool.
That was the
I
one
enjoyed that.
standout song that I had written down. Yeah.
I mean, that song
Hmm.
slaps.
Hmm.
Anyway, so um, yeah. Um, but the one of the I didn't know, and again, like I listened to the radio with this stuff on, so you take the best albums of the area, you distill those into a couple songs, those get played on the radio. So obviously, I'd heard Chapel of Love before, but not this version. The
Right.
version that pretty much everybody knows is from a group called the Dixie Cups, um, which I noted, like this version from the Ronettes is much slower and
Yeah.
without the instrumentation, which I was just like, yeah, I could see why this one isn't the one that everybody loves. Like there's no bells, like there's none of that.
Hmm.
So it was just different. But that one was one that stuck out to me for sure. Yeah, I could appreciate this one. So what did you score this one as?
Two.
I gave this one a 3.5.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I was like, I have a soft spot for some of these songs. Like I can't help it. Like, all right. So moving on to album 493 from Marvin Gaye, entitled "Here, My Dear." Interestingly, this is HERE, as
Hmm.
in "Here,
Here.
My
Yeah.
Dear." Um, this album was released on December 15th, 1978, from an imprint of Motown called Tamla. I couldn't tell if that was an L or an I. Tamla Records. It's self-produced. It comes in at 71 minutes and 51 seconds, which is
Hmm.
at this point the longest one, and it will be the longest one until we get to like some of the crazy compilation ones.
Hmm.
Um, this is Marvin Gaye's 15th album in his discography,
I didn't realize he was
and it
so
is
prolific.
yeah, no kidding. It is the number 493rd best album. Now, I believe, spoiler alert, we will see more Marvin Gaye albums on this list. Um,
I,
but this is definitely one of them.
yep, yep.
Um, what did you think about this one?
I liked it.
Yeah, tell
Yeah,
me more.
I like I said, I've been on a bit of a funk kick for a while now, and this is funky R&B sort of thing, and after listening to the Rufus album, I was in the mood for hopefully something that would scratch that itch. This is the first album that gave me the chills. Like I got goosebumps listening to this album. It's hitting me something about and it wasn't lyrically, it was musically, and I just connected with the music of this album pretty significantly. There was a lot of I don't know if it was actual jamming, like actual improvisation, or if it was written, but there was a lot of extended instrumental parts to a lot of these songs that I enjoyed listening to. Um, Lyrically, like, I think we talked a little bit about this earlier. This album was basically about his divorce from his wife, and there
Hmm.
wasn't, it didn't have much for me there lyrically, but musically, I really, really liked this. I again, going back to that the funky R&B stuff, for me it's a very drum and bass thing, and when I can feel like I'm in that pocket with the drummer and the bass player and just grooving with it, I'm in a special place at that point. And I got that out of this album. Not to like an extreme level where it was mind blowing and life changing, but to a point that I enjoyed this album pretty decent.
Yeah, this is one that I ripped through pretty quickly on the first listen. And I don't have the experience with Marvin Gaye that many people do. Just in that like it wasn't music that was played a lot for me. Um, and but obviously, I mean, if you're a music fan, how do you not know the name, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went in this album thinking like, oh, there's going to be songs on this that I know. Nope, there were
No,
not.
nope.
Um, so so it was kind of a cold call. Um, I agree with you. Like, I think if I listen to probably I think the back half of it again tonight. Um, and there were parts of it that almost felt familiar. Like they didn't register with me enough to be like, oh yeah, I remember this song. But like, it grooved to the
Mm-hmm.
point where I was like, yeah, okay, I got it. Cool, this is fun. Um, my first listen, track 11, "A Funky Space Reincarnation," stuck out.
Yep.
It's just like kind of a goofy song, lyrically and soundscape wise, and like that it was just interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was also interesting as I was reading up on this one that this album was called Bizarre and Uncommercial when it was first released, and like yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially when, like you said, you think about how it was written about his divorce. Half of the royalties from this album went to his ex-wife, which he
Hmm.
knew going into this. So, as I'm reading about this, the story of this seems like, and when I say seems like, I don't know all the details, but it seemed almost like that kind of record deal where it's like, hey, you've got, you owe us 3 albums,
Yeah.
right? Something like that.
Yeah.
It seems like when they got divorced, it was like he's gonna owe her royalties on maybe the contract he has right now,
Yeah.
almost as if that's money in the bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like he went into the studio thinking like, all right, well, I gotta crank out these albums, and when this is your 15th album, like maybe that's just what you do anyways. But I gotta crank these out. So he called it like a nothing album at first, right? Saying like he literally quote said, where was it? Why should I break my neck when Anna was going to wind up with the money anyways? Like that was the mindset that he described himself like,
Went
I'm not
into
going to put a lot into this.
yeah.
Which then he went on to say later, as he's doing it, is like, I couldn't I couldn't do that.
Couldn't yeah.
Like he's kind of went into it like, yeah, whatever, whatever, whatever. And then as he gets into it, he's like, no, this is my art, this is my
I
music, and
gotta
I'm gonna
yeah.
put into it. Um, So, I mean, he also played, it says he played all the keyboard parts on the album, saying later they didn't plan it, but it just turned out to be a hands on project, which I didn't know he was that level of musician. Um, yeah, it was interesting. This album, as I mentioned before, like the critics did not dig it when it came out. I think
Yeah.
because it was different and there was a lot of stream of consciousness in it, and like, he's just processing through this. So I think when you
Mm-hmm.
put the two things together, right, like that huge life changing event and at least the kernel of an idea at first, like I'm just going to put out music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, commercially at the time, people expected one thing and they got something else. But what is it? Almost 50 years later, do my man, close to 50 years later, right?
Yeah.
26 years later, like critics are like, yeah, this album's amazing. Like they
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Which okay,
Yeah.
again, like I feel like I'm saying that a lot. I'm like, okay, I'll believe you. Like I don't have an argument. So you gave this album a 3?
I gave it a 3. Yeah.
Yeah,
Three
I
point
gave
five.
this.
Sorry, 3.5.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Good for you. I gave this one a 2. Um, Again, because I'm looking at some of these going like, would I return to this album to seek it out?
Mm-hmm.
No, I would not. Okay. Would I, if it came up on shuffle, like would I be like, huh, and maybe skip it? I probably would in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Now some of his other stuff probably not, but like this one, it was what it was.
Yeah.
Now that being said, if I listened to it a bunch more, I bet it would grow on me. So
Yeah.
that's how it works. Yeah. All right. So that was where is it? That was Here, My Dear from Marvin Gaye. All right. The 492nd ranked album is Bonnie Raitt's Nick of Time. This album was released on March 21st, 1989 on Capitol Records, produced by Don Was from the US of A. This is Bonnie Raitt's 10th album in her discography. Kyle, what did you think?
I wasn't. I wasn't. I wasn't.
Tell it to me, baby.
I mean, I wasn't expecting. I don't know what I was expecting going into this.
Same. Yes.
Thing Called Love. I know that song. That's
Yep, absolutely.
and that was the extent of what I knew going into it. I did know that she is an absolutely ripping guitarist. And so I think the thing that I would say that I was disappointed with this album is that we didn't see that very much here. They were very well written songs. I enjoyed the songs. I liked the songs a lot. I wish we got more of that real ripping guitar work from her, because as a blues guitarist, as a country guitarist, she can, and I've gone out and sought out YouTube videos, live videos of her playing, and she really is a phenomenal guitarist. That being said, that's also a pretty common complaint of a lot of the studio recordings of some of the more popular poppy blues guitarists. Some like some of the earlier John Mayer albums, or like Eric Clapton studio albums. They're phenomenal guitarists, but their studio recorded work doesn't really feature that guitar work so much. So I didn't really fault her too much with that on here. But the music itself, I enjoyed listening to it. There's one thing, the 80s sound Like there's just, and I don't know what
Yes.
it is, and I
I
really
have a take on it.
okay, all right, and that's I want to pinpoint what that is, and I don't know that I know what it is just yet, but this album had it.
Here's what I think the sound is. It sounds like it was made on a keyboard.
Yeah,
Like the whole thing, not the guitar, but like the bass, the drums, the everything else. It sounds like it was made on a
tapped out.
Casio keyboard.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
like it's. I remember seventh grade technology class. For some reason, our technology teacher, he was a Def Leppard fan. So we watched like a 10-minute thing on Def Leppard right after the whatever accident it was, and the thing that they talked about, I still remember this, is how one of the things that was different about Def Leppard's drums is that they were digital.
Hmm.
So he would have the sound, and I mean essentially it was like a MIDI,
Hmm.
right? So you'd hit it, and like it you hit that snare, it makes the same snare sound every single time, no matter what.
Hmm.
That's what this reminded me of, right?
Yeah,
Like everything is produced to the point where there is no organic sound. There's no reverb in anything. It's just like it is straight up.
yeah.
Like that's the
It's
sound.
just
It's like they put that microphone so freaking close and in a vacuum that is the only sound you hear.
hmm.
And to me, that was incredibly boring. Like I listened to this album and I was just kind of like I couldn't get out of that like
Hmm.
that 80s sound. In my mind it reminded me of like going to a wedding when we were a kid, and that was like a song that was on, and some people were dancing but some people were eating, and like like it's
Yeah,
just kind of background music,
yeah.
it's just kind of background music.
Yep.
And it's a song you can dance to, or these are songs that you can dance to, and yeah, cool.
Hmm.
um that, to me, I mean, Thing Called Love, that song
Yeah.
is a banger. Interestingly, like he only had songwriting credits according to Wikipedia on two of these songs.
I noticed that
Um,
earlier when I was looking
which
through. I
which
was
I thought she was more of a singer songwriter, which doesn't mean that she isn't. But
right.
like it was interesting to me that in this album, this is one of the ones that, like, they say that this is the her commercial breakthrough after years of personal and professional struggles. So
Hmm.
she was a well-known guitarist. Sure, she played around, probably a great session guitarist, and played live really well, and played with a bunch of people. But as her own artist, like this is the one that kind of broke her through. And again, her 10th album. Um, this is listed on a bunch of lists. In 2003, Rolling Stone put this as the 229th album.
Hmm.
So it took a hit there. Um, it's also in the book of 1001 albums you need to hear before you die. The album was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation,
Hmm.
which is that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So that this album, maybe it'll be in space someday. Um, but yeah, there's some stuff about her convincing the label to release some stuff like that. But ultimately, I
Oh.
mean, the album charted at number one in the U.S. It is 5 times platinum in the U.S. and 3 times platinum in Canada. But again, platinum in the U.S. is 1 million units sold. It's only 100,000 in Canada.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah.
I mean, hey, it's more albums than I've ever sold. Um,
This I may be misremembering this now, but this I think was produced by Mutt Lang, which was, as I was listening to this album, one of the big takeaways that I had with it was I could hear the inception of like the later into the 90s country crossover, especially female country crossover that came, the Shania Twain and the Dixie Chicks and that sort of thing. And then I went and saw it. And again, I could be misremembering it, but I think this was produced by Mutt Lang, who was Shania Twain's husband. So a lot of that connection kind of started to make sense in my head, at least, to see that this was something that came out and kind of paved the way for some of those country crossovers in the 90s.
I think I think that you're probably right about the crossover stuff. It was not produced by Mutt Lang,
It
at least
wasn't.
not according to Wikipedia.
I might be thinking of something else then.
Could be. But like I get what you're saying because like Thing Called Love, there's elements of country music in it, right? But in my memory, when I think and I hear that song in my head, I don't think of country music when I hear that song.
No.
Like personally, that doesn't register to
Yeah,
me.
not that
The
song
other ones,
specifically. Yeah,
sure,
yeah, yeah. Oh, you know
yeah.
what? It wasn't this album that was. It was another album coming up that I was shocked to hear was produced by, or at least a specific song on an album that we're gonna get to soon was produced by Mutt Lang. That then
Mm,
made total sense. We'll get to that
gotcha.
when we get there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, yeah, like you said about the guitar stuff, I read the notes kind of as I'm listening to it, and like you said, I was kind of disappointed that the notes from Apple Music say, and of course, her trademark slides guitar sizzles righteously, especially on Thing Called Love, the album's hit single. I didn't hear it. Like
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure it's there, but
yeah, it didn't
it
sizzle.
didn't stick out to me. It didn't sizzle. Yeah, it percolated.
Yeah,
Yeah, it percolated. Yeah. So, I mean, what'd you score this album?
3.
I gave
It
it a
was,
three.
yeah, it was fine.
And unfortunately, in my case, I think it got a three because of a Thing Called Love.
Hmm.
Um, that that's not a song that, like I said, that I'm gonna put on a mixtape. But like when that thing comes out, that's a groove. Yep,
Yep,
I'm with you.
yep,
It's
yep.
not gonna make me upset you play that song. So
That Mutt Lang song is "You and I" by Lady Gaga. Was produced by Mutt Lang.
yes, yes, that's funny. All right, album 491 is the wonderful Harry Styles Harry's House. It was released on May 20th of 2022. Maybe some recency bias,
Hmm.
maybe not, depending on who you are. Um, Depending on our take on this one, they're going to come for us in the comments. This one is put out basically through Sony Records, through their imprint Columbia, through their imprint Erskine. Like, it's Sony Records. Kid Harpoon and Tyler Johnson are two of the credited producers on there. I think this one generally comes from the US, but I mean, Harry is not American, so I put UK and US on there.
Hmm.
Sure, we'll give him some love. This is Harry's third album, which I just thought his other albums were part of One Direction. I didn't know he had other solos up to this point, um, but yeah. So this is Harry's House. Kyle, what did you think of Harry's House?
This is another one of those albums that I am glad to have decided to listen to this list for. If you
You
had,
were just saying how much you love Tool. Um,
I and like I've always wanted to be open minded with the music that I listen to. In practice, that hasn't always worked out, but I always want to give things a shot. This is something that 6 months ago I probably never would have bothered with and would have written off as most likely something that I figured was just formulaic top 40 pop trash. And I am so glad to have been wrong about that because I
sure.
really, really, really liked this album. It
What songs did you like? Like what were you drawn to?
so this was the first album that has introduced me to a new genre of music. Like first album on this list
Mm,
that has like actually brought something beyond just this album. Like reading through and listening through and listening to it, there was something there that I could tell was heavily influenced by something else, but I didn't know what it was. And it took a little bit of digging to see that he in this album was influenced by Japanese city pop.
mm,
And then I went and listened to some Japanese city pop, and I was like, that's what I like about the Harry Styles album. Like, this album introduced me to an entire new genre of music that I now enjoy listening to. I was pleasantly, very pleasantly surprised by how much I liked this album, how much life and depth it had, how much it pulled from a wide variety of genres. You know, he talked a lot about that Japanese city pop influence, but there's a lot of jazz and R&B in there too that was just a lot of fun and very satisfying to listen to. I think the one thing with this one that I had a little bit of a hesitation with was some of the programmed drums kind of felt a little stiff at times, but otherwise yeah, this is by far, these first 10 albums, this is by far my favorite.
Yeah, so all right, so I had heard this album shortly after it came out. Um, as you may know, I sometimes dabble in refinishing old furniture,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like doing that sort of stuff. And as I'm doing that in my garage, it was like, hey, what do I want to listen to? And this album had gotten a lot of buzz, and it was like, oh, cool, I'll be part of the zeitgeist. I'm hip, I'm cool, I'm with it. So I remember I spun this album while I was working, and I mean, I want to make sure music from a sushi restaurant, the first track, like that one grabbed me.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep. Yep.
like the layered vocal melody, the horn, like the pseudo horn, the faux horns. I mean, the I don't think it's stream of consciousness, but like the disconnected lyrics, like literally just painting a picture. Like you said, you can close your eyes and um, so it's not surprising. I'm unfamiliar with what was it? Japanese street pop? Is that what it is?
City pop, Japanese city pop.
City pop? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've never heard of that genre, but I believe you. But like, and then when I hear you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, that must be what this is. I think that song is the one that I will like carry with me
Mm-hmm.
to the point where I listened to it tonight, and that earworm of a like that faux horn line just got me, and I was like humming it or whistling it, and my 6 year old was humming it too. And she goes, "Dad, were you humming?" And then she hums it. I was like, "Well, this is what I was listening to." I had my headphones in. I took them out, and this is what I was listening. She goes, "Oh yeah, we played that in PE today. Mister So and So played that. I heard that today." I was like, "Oh,
Okay.
cool.
Yeah.
That's fun." Um, like that just sticks with you.
Yeah.
Um, Now the other tracks on here, I mean, as it was blew up. I mean, that was all over TikTok. I mean, like crazy. Um, and a couple other songs on this album, or at least one other. Which one was it? Yeah, that one really took off. Matilda is another one that people liked a lot. I didn't connect to that one as much, but if all this album gave me was music from a sushi restaurant, that would be enough.
Yeah.
Like it would be enough for me.
Yeah.
Um, I dig that one. I like it.
Yeah. That was the
Um,
standout song I had written down too.
yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a surprise, but I mean, as it was is really good too. Um, I don't think it's interesting. I think he has better songs. Um, like he has put out better song, like more captivating songs. But when you talk about an album, right,
Mm-hmm.
as a curated piece of
Yeah.
of work, like yeah, it makes sense to me. I
Yeah.
could see. I mean, there's some recency bias, I'm sure, but like, I mean, this is a huge album.
Oh yeah.
It charted. I mean, it charted all over the place. But I mean, it won 3 Grammy Awards. Yeah, it won 3 Grammy Awards: Album of the Year, Best Pop Vocal Album, and Best Engineered Album in the non-classical category. Um, so sure, I'll let them have that. But I mean, it won Album of the Year. I mean, it won a boatload of other stuff: American Music Awards, MTV Video Music Awards, People's Choice Awards, Brit Awards. Like, I mean, it won a lot. It charted number one on more countries than I care to list. I mean, across the world,
Yeah.
it charted at number one. Now, what we've been talking about platinum certified records a couple times. I think it is worth noting that like this album is firmly in the streaming era,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
people aren't going out to
Not
FYE and buying
fine.
the
Yeah.
CD.
No.
Um, I mean, it still went multi-platinum in the US, in the UK. Um,
That's wild.
there you go. Right, we talk about the levels of platinum in other countries. To go platinum in Hungary, you have to sell 4,000 records.
All
So it is four times platinum in Hungary.
right.
Um, yeah, so if we wanted to chart somewhere, maybe we'll start in Hungary. Um, but yeah, I mean, critically, commercially, everything. This album like blew. And again, like I came to know this album. No free ads. I listen to the Rolling Stone podcast every once in a while when it's interesting, and they had a review of this album, and like so I kind of listened to that as a precursor to actually hearing it, so I'd have
Hmm.
some context. Um, I mean, this was all over the place. The artwork is fun. Like it's just fun. It's a fun record.
Yeah. Yeah.
I liked it.
I liked it a lot.
What did you score it?
And I gave this a 4 out of 5.
I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, meaning there are songs on this that I would definitely go back
Go back.
to and
Yeah.
listen to again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I would plug along with with this album is, if you haven't, check out his Tiny Desk concert.
I've seen them. I haven't
Yeah.
seen this one.
He has a Tiny Desk concert, and it's really good.
Cool.
I mean, the only song
Awesome.
going into this album, the only Harry Styles song that I knew was Watermelon Sugar.
Watermelon
Yeah.
Sugar High.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the only, I mean, even listening through this album, I didn't recognize any songs.
Really
Yeah. I
interesting.
no.
I mean, I knew I had never heard the Music from a Sushi Restaurant. I knew as it was, but Watermelon Sugar High and then Sign of the Times to me is like to me Sign of the Times is probably my favorite. It's so funny to say because I never thought I would have said this. This Sign of the Times is probably my favorite Harry Styles song. But so you should check that one
Hmm.
out. That's so funny. I'm definitely not a One Direction guy, but well, that's not true. They've got some bangers in there too. So
All right. That's the
all right,
first
let's put a
10
bow on this thing.
albums. Yeah, that's the first 10
Yeah.
albums.
All right. One of the recurring segments that we would like to explore on this recap of these albums is we don't really have a name for it yet, but I guess it would be like I've got one better. You know, maybe something. Maybe it's a working title, right? But we'll call it something like that. I've got one better. So for these first 10 albums, 500 through 491, I have one better. Are you ready for it? Thinking of the Arcade Fire, and I referenced this earlier. The album Trampoline by the band Steel Train, I think, is a better album than the Arcade Fire album, and they can come for me in the comments. I don't give a shit. The songwriting is more digestible. It's easier to enter into. There are some amazing moments that I think rival the best moments on that record. So I've got one better is the album Trampoline by Steel Train, released in 2007 on Drive Thru Records. I think it's better than Funeral by Arcade Fire. Yeah.
All right. I've got one better. I've got one better.
Okay, give me your one better.
Shaq Fu by Shaq is better than that Suicide album.
My God, I thought you were gonna say it was better than like Marvin Gaye or something, and we were gonna like get doxxed.
Nope. Go back and listen to some Shaq Fu, and you'll have a better
So
time than listening to that Suicide album.
let me bring that up. I mean, the first song from Shaq Fu has Prince Rakim, the RZA, and Method Man on it, so I don't think that's a stretch. I
Case
think
closed. Case closed.
so. So those were albums 500 through 491. Um, all in all, we're off to a pretty decent start. Like taken collectively, I know you talked about there's a bell curve for you for the most part. I
Mhm.
would agree. Um, Next time we'll get into the next 10 or so albums, probably starting at 490 and going roughly to 481. There's some bangers in there for sure. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
We'll chat more.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Cool.
Hey, thanks for watching. We'd love to hear what you think of these albums, so let us know in the comments. Do you approve these grooves? And as always, a quick thumbs up helps a lot. Subscribe so you can see all 500 albums, and we'll see you on the next record.